And welcome everybody to the first Bangers and Classics podcast of 2022. It's been voted the
Except
most.
it isn't. It'll go out on the 30th of December.
Have I gone early then? But I
You
mean,
went early. He's guilty of premature podcasting.
well, there's only like a day or so in it. I don't think my research reveals that quite a few people listen to it several days after it's launched. So there you go. I was going to pretend it was next year. We're doing
Oh
next
dear
year's
God.
predictions. It's all about next year. And yeah, I still have to pretend I'm in 2021. It's terrible.
I think you are already, mate.
Uh,
No, do you want
yeah.
to start again? Well, it's up to
No,
you.
no, I'm quite happy. I'm living under the misapprehension that I'm in 2022, and I'm broadcasting to an audience that comprises of people enjoying the fruits of 2022 and all the
Ah,
good wishes that came to pass.
but I thought you lived in 1972, James.
I live in 1979, David. I did move forward a tiny bit because
All
it
right.
just included a few more things. But yes, I do. I do live there. But I am the ghost of Christmas future and past, and also the next year past. Um, so yeah, this will be all about next year and what happened last year. But we're apparently still in 2021 when we're recording this, and apparently you're going to listen to it in 2021 as well. But let's hope there's no confusion on your part.
Oh, I'm always confused. You always
Yeah.
confuse me, James. I never know.
Oh,
I
good.
never know what's going on. Sometimes it's better that way, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. We haven't
Yeah.
told each other, or we haven't told the audience who we are, David.
Oh, who are we? That's not. See, I'm confused. I'm so confused. I've
Really?
forgotten.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's me and it's him. And what have you been up to, David?
What have I been up to? Oh God, yeah, just running around doing errands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Did get a couple of classic car spots. In
Mm,
fact, I have three to report.
goodness me.
Yes, surprisingly, and they were all in use. Two were in a car park, admittedly, but it was a public car park. You weren't going to leave them there, so they're in the use box. The other one, the first one I saw, was a blue Scimitar GTC.
Mm.
Now, when was the last time you saw one of those?
1987.
He's very precise. This is what I
Yeah.
like about James. He's straight to this. I said, you ask a question, you get a
Yeah.
direct answer.
Well, if you ask me
Yeah,
that, I always get my years correct, David. Whatever happens, I'm never in any doubt about what year I'm operating in.
right, okay. Right, well, anyway, it was a blue Scimitar
Yeah.
GTC. It was being driven in the streets of my hometown
Mm.
by a sort of middle-aged chap. It had been raining, so there'd be some precipitation still on the road. It had been frosty a couple of days earlier, so again, there'd still be traces of grit or salt
Mm.
on the road. So kudos to this chap for driving it. He
Mm.
did have the roof up. I thought it was a balmy 8 degrees centigrade. I thought you could have the roof down, but that's the only demerit there. The car itself looked in pretty good condition, not conqueror, but definitely very presentable. And yeah, it was very pleasant to see it. It certainly enhanced my day. Yesterday, I saw two more. I was out last night doing some shopping, avoiding the shops, avoiding the Christmas rush. And I saw in my favourite car park, which is near a certain fast food establishment, the
Mm.
beetle I've mentioned before with the various colours of paint and indeed primer on it. It was there in a different spot this time, which proves that it does indeed move. And there was also what looked like there was also what looked like a metallic magenta Mini A
Mm.
registration. That's the 80s A, so it'll be about 82 or 83 registered, with full Mini light wheels on it.
Mm.
And I have to say, it looked very, very good condition. Not a trace of rust on the bodywork. Very clean, very tidy indeed.
Mm.
And again, obviously being used in spite of the time of year. So
Yeah.
again, the hat's tipped to whoever owns that. The three classic car spots in the week leading up to Christmas. That's not bad.
No, it's not well
Hmm.
done, David. That's very, very good.
Obviously, it's well done to the owners really for taking them
Mm.
out and using them, and giving me something to report.
Well, that's right. Well, yeah, I mean, I was some distance away from home, but I saw a rather wonderful Porsche 911. And the thing was, it
Oh,
wasn't one of these modern things that are about 30 foot wide. It was one of the original. It had to be a 1964. It was probably a T. I don't think it was anything exciting as an S, but it was so impossibly pretty. It was in white. And as you know from that era, they're sort of beautifully adorned with chrome. But the thing is, it just looks so small and sweet, and it
Hmm.
was and we're in December, even though I said we're in January. But it was December when I saw it, so it was again, yeah. Full respect to the person driving it around. It was in immaculate condition, and it was just so nice to see because again, you might see them on high days and holidays, but not on a sort of a murky winter's afternoon when it's sort of getting quite dark. So it was very, very nice to see somebody out and about in that, which does raise your spirits.
Hmm.
Apart from that, we saw a Polo Mark IV, which is sort of tricked out as a sort of a wide load support vehicle. So
Hmm.
maybe it would have been appropriate if it had been driving in front of a modern Porsche.
Oh.
So I don't know why someone did that, but it was painted red, but it had all the reflector stuff all over it, and you'd like to know a bit more about whether it was some extended gag of some description, or whether their day job is actually driving wide loads, and then when they go shopping in the evening, they have to get into a little Polo. But that was quite funny. But polos are good. I like polos.
Well, talking about
Mm,
jokes, this isn't really related to cars. Involves a coach. Oh, it does involve
yeah.
a fake police car. I
Mm,
was up seeing the EV today, and
mm,
the place where it is, that's where it's stored at the moment.
mm,
Uh, the proprietor told me they'd had to move it out a few days ago because the storage space was effectively hired by an adventure company,
mm,
and there was a team building exercise involving people from Russia, I believe,
mm,
who were all on a bus. And the bus was driving through the town. Again, it's one main road through this town. It's a seaside town, and it's really hemmed in tight to the coast. So one main road, and a fake police car pulls them over, directs them into where the EV is.
mm,
And it's a large shed. The doors open, in goes the bus, and hooded men with pretend machine guns jump
mm.
out
Goodness
and
me.
pretend to take them all hostage,
Mm.
which is a bit of a strange way of operating a team building exercise.
It is, isn't it?
But
Goodness
but
me.
there we go. Yeah, absolutely.
Quite a dark
Um,
turn, that, isn't it, really?
yeah, and these were apparently Russian people. Russians are quite a hardy bunch.
Mm.
I wouldn't be taking liberties with them if I were
No.
them. I really wouldn't. It seems they all enjoyed the experience, though, and everybody remained
Mm.
friends after. Which is probably just as well for those conducting the prank. But
Yeah.
there we go. Yeah. So just add that as a little aside of
Mm.
surprises and things you don't expect. Anyway, if we move on now, I think to the Bangor Classic for this week, James.
Oh, right.
Unless
Mm.
you've got any other car spots.
No, 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 that'll do.
That'll do.
Mm.
You mean there's more than I've cut you off in your prime?
No, no, no. I'm quite happy with those. That's quite a good spread. There was a banger and a classic. So a tick tick as far as I'm
Tick
concerned.
tick. All
Yeah.
right, jolly good. All right, a blue tick. Okay. Um, this week's Bangor Classic is, well, it's probably a foregone conclusion, isn't it? It's a classic. It's a Jensen Interceptor,
Mm.
and we've never really talked about the Interceptor much in the podcast.
No,
So
of course,
now's
no. Hardly at all, David.
hardly at all. And
Mm.
considering it's such an iconic car,
Mm.
and it's a car that I think we're both pretty fond of.
Yeah.
So maybe we should make an exception. It's still the festive season,
Yeah.
sort of. So let's just dive in there and let's have your views on the Interceptor.
Well, I think it is over the years. It's one of the most broken down cars I've seen at the back of forecourts. I don't. I've almost lost count of the number that I've seen that were not operational, and that was certainly in the 80s and 90s. There was a whole slew of them, and I do remember writing about them in some features over the years where I said, yeah, and then, at the back there's an interceptor not working because they were. I mean, they were just trouble. They weren't worth. I mean, they're still not worth an absolute fortune, but they were
Mm.
really just a couple of grand, and you would still not touch it because it was going to be a complete nightmare.
Oh.
But I don't think people realise how cheap they were, but they
Mm.
were very cheap for a reason. They are hand built cars. I've said this before, in that the people who restore them will tell you that panels don't match up, doors don't match up because they were individually made to fit the left, offside or near side. So, if you're going to restore one, it is a world of expensive pain and coach building. Um, skill is going to need to actually bring one back to life. Probably the
Mm.
easiest bit is the engine. You can probably just get one from the states as a in a crate. But the rest of it is quite a lot of problem to put together. So for that reason, for many years, it was I suppose, a respectable classic banger, wasn't it?
Mm. Well, I think it was actually a banger at one point,
Yeah.
as you say, because they were single figures. You could buy a Interceptor, you could buy a sort of half decent one
Mm.
for 5 grand in about 1990 or so,
Yeah.
as I recall it. And I think many of us were tempted to, and you thought, hang on, how much is this going to cost to run? How much is this going to cost to fix? But I suspect a lot of people just dived in there and thought, oh,
Mm.
Interceptor, 3, 4 grand, I'll have one of those, thank you very much. And then realised just how thirsty it is, how expensive it is to service, and how expensive it is to restore because the tin worm will take hold.
Mm.
It's a fact of life with Interceptor. They do rust. Obviously, if they're restored properly and properly rust proofed, then that's not going to be a problem. But
Mm.
back then, they really were cars that had reached a banger stage, which was, it's quite tragic really for such a beautiful, such an iconic
Mm.
car.
Yeah, very much
But
so.
thankfully, they have survived,
They
and
have.
they're now coveted, and as they should be. They're cracking cars. Obviously, if you're of a certain age, you'll have grown up with Interceptor. The shape of it, just
Mm.
the name of it, was great. And you see them on TV all the time. Suave international crime fighters would rock up in their Interceptor with a bevy of lovely ladies in tow, usually.
I mean, strangely enough, just recently, I'm working on some little projects, and I know this isn't technically an interceptor, because an FF is actually just a Jensen FF. It's not an
Hmm,
interceptor,
that's right.
as any anorak will tell you. But there was actually a car which was an FFF 100. I don't know if anybody has come across that. But that was a one-off special. It was built in conjunction with GKN, and I had to seek permission, which I have got from GKN, to reproduce a brochure picture that they produced of this one-off car. But it was used in 1972 to set a world record. I don't know if you know what the world record is, David, at all. It was fitted with a Chrysler Hemi 426 engine, and it was incredibly quick. But what they did on a wet runway was set the 0 to 100 to 0 record, which stood for quite a few years, I think. And I think they beat the previous record by quite a lot of seconds, but they did it in 12.2 seconds. So that was
Right.
quite incredible. So it was a proper supercar, and it was one off. And I think it ended up in America. It might be back here. The car itself. I don't know what the state of play it is. I think it used to be on the show circuit for a bit, but hopefully someone's looking after it somewhere. But
Hmm.
yeah, all I dream for Christmas is an FFF 100.
Well, I can't offer you that, I'm afraid.
No, oh,
The chap who was the chief engineer for Jensen
mm,
lives near me. He lives just a few miles away. As I mentioned
mm,
before, there's one-off prototype Interceptor, which was to be the development car for the F-Type, and
mm,
Jensen F-Type. He owns it, and it's wider and longer than a standard Interceptor,
yeah,
and has got, amongst other things, hydrodynamic rear suspension.
mm,
Um, and it still exists, still in great condition.
yeah,
Um, he might be a man to ask about the triple F 100.
mm,
I'm sure he would have been involved in that
yeah,
project. Um, so yeah, we could perhaps talk to him someday and maybe
yeah,
get some more details, because
absolutely,
yeah, all these sort of cars, these one-offs, prototypes that maybe should have been put into production but never were, they're all
yeah,
fascinating, and in many
mm,
cases are much more interesting than the cars we actually got.
yeah,
But there we have it. So anyway, Mr. Rupert, I'm going to go classic for the Interceptor. It's a cracking car, cracking looking car,
mm.
subject to caveat that they ain't cheap to run, they ain't cheap to buy. But if you can afford it and if you want one, then good luck to you.
It is, and it is. It's I think, as we pointed out, it's one of those fascinating cars that, in a way, Jaguars have always done. Is that they go from banger to classic. They go from brand new. They go through the whole life cycle,
Mm,
and this one certainly has. And yeah, so yeah, it's a classic now. But there was a time when it wasn't.
mm. Well, if you ever want to watch a film about Jaguars,
Mm,
um, it's about a young man who dreams of owning a Jaguar. He's down in Australia. It's a comedy film, and he buys a car. Which, well, I won't say what happens. Just watch the film. The Jaguar plays a key role in it. It's an LAXJ. film called The Big Steal. It's from 1989, I think. And Ben Mendelsohn, who was the principal actor in it, has gone on to bigger things. He appears in a lot of Hollywood films these days, many years later. But certainly The Big Steal is very funny. It's possibly got one of the funniest lines I've ever seen in the film, but I dare not say it in this podcast. So I think we'll just take a break there before I say something I'll be given cause to regret. You're listening to Bangers and Classics, an analog podcast for a digital world. And we are back after the break, and we're going to try something new this week. It's a one-off because of the time of year. We have at great expense, and Mr. Ruppert, it cost Mr. Ruppert lots of his free stuff to acquire this person's services. We have had a reading from Mystic Mog, who has told us several things that are going to happen in 2021. I'm going to start, James, by telling you one of the predictions.
Oh, right.
Yep. Apparently, a firm in the West Midlands is going to offer EV conversions to internal combustion engines. Apparently, that's going to happen this year.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it should happen because I had proposed that the original Honda Insight should get a VTEC engine. That would be great.
Well, there you go. Then maybe they'll start with that one.
Be the first customer.
Yes, and also Mystic Mob told us that the Department of Transport is going to be acquired for £1, I believe, by Extinction Rebellion. Well, given recent comments, I think they were already pretty much in charge of it anyway.
Yeah.
In other news, a government minister, so again, we're told,
Yep.
will state that having a roof over your head is an outmoded concept.
Well, it is.
Well, absolutely, you will have nothing and be happy.
That's right. I'm looking forward to living in a ditch. I don't know about you, David.
Well, it's the Four Yorkshiremen sketch, isn't it?
It is, yeah. That's right.
That's what we're heading towards. Only we're going to live it.
That's right, and that were luxury, but there you go.
Luxury.
Yeah, luxury.
Well, apparently there's a Silicon Valley company has announced a car, or will announce a car powered by, get this, rotationally generated potential energy.
Goodness me.
Yeah, clockwork in other words.
Yeah.
And finally, and this is apparently going to happen towards the end of the year, the commissioners of Nolan Lighthouses are going to offer Greta Thunberg a job as a foghorn.
Incredible.
I think that, yeah. So I think all of those are going to happen.
That's right.
And then common sense is going to prevail throughout the land, throughout the world, in fact. That's also going to happen. That's not Mystic Mog's prediction, that's my prediction. Because it better happen or I will get really cross. And you wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
No.
You probably wouldn't like me when I'm not angry, but you definitely wouldn't like me when I am. So what about you, James? You get any predictions?
No, not really. Because the thing is, the world is now mad, and anything you say, I mean, all those predictions there for Mystic Mog are perfectly reasonable. There isn't, you really can't question them at all because they are quite likely to happen. So anything that we propose is probably going to come to pass anyway, whether we like it or not. I try. I couldn't really top those at all. I just thought, well, no, because
what we were talking about earlier, what we were talking about before we came on with this, is don't give in, don't let them beat you. Do not do that. Simple as that. Don't.
Well, what I'm going to say is that people have been sending me cars that they've bought actually just recently, and that puts a spring in my step. And
great.
It was very good. I did send one to you the other day. There's a very good.
You did, yeah.
Now he buys cars at a furious rate, and then he sells them. But he buys interesting cars, and his name's Richard. And he bought a Madison, which is basically a sort of a Morgan type kit car. He likes kit cars, and quite right too.
Right.
But
I thought it was a type of bike race.
Is it that one with the moped?
I think it is. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm just going off at a tangent as usual.
No, that's okay. But no. So he's bought a Madison. They sort of like treated himself to a Madison at the end of the year. But in the course of a year, he'll buy 5, 6, 7, 8 cars, and they're always interesting cars. And he I don't think he's ever owned a boring car. All of his stuff. He's probably had a Jensen actually. I must ask him how that went. No, it's quite remarkable. And then, strange enough, before I joined you on this 2022 podcast, David, I had an email from someone else I know who likes British Legend cars. Used to work at Rover, But he's bought a 200 Tomcat, the turbo
Oh,
200. He said it was just too good not to buy.
right.
Um,
You didn't find it in a hedge, did he?
he
Backwards?
didn't find it in a hedge backwards. I think he found
No.
it in a garage. The picture he sent me, it was amongst other British Leyland stuff. So I presume it belonged to someone who appreciated old Rovers.
Hmm.
There you go. That's how you can lift yourself
Hmm.
out of any despond or despair in
Yeah.
2022 by thinking, yeah, I'll drive one of those interesting cars, which could be a banger and it could be a classic.
It could, yeah. I mean, you mentioned the Tomcat. I mean, there's an
Mm,
interesting car. Dynamically, you might say it's slightly challenged, but it's a very pretty car,
it is, yeah.
and it goes well in a
Mm,
straight line. It's just, I think perhaps that the actual chassis dynamics weren't the best, if
mm,
I'm being honest with it. But perhaps I'm wrong. I've never driven one. I'm going on what I read
mm,
about them, and perhaps that's not fair. Perhaps
yeah.
you know I'll have to drive one someday. That's it. Just give me a wide enough road, bereft of hedges, and I'll be fine. I'm sure.
Uh, so
I
yeah,
know, I know.
no,
It's
that's
shocking.
right. So in 2022, let's all drive interesting cars. I think that's the theme really, and that's how we correct and right all the wrongs. So
Yeah, what's the starting point? The Banger and Classics Manifesto is about to go to print.
mm,
All 54 volumes of it.
yeah,
Buying and driving an interesting car. That's a good starting point. And that is in the manifesto. So
mm,
that's one of the points ticked off. I'm sure we'll tick off some more as the year goes by.
mm,
Anyway, James, we're talking about 2022. What about 2021?
mm.
It's been a pretty rubbish year, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it has actually, strangely enough, because I think I wrote some things down, and all I had written down was E10 petrol, and then no petrol, because that's what happened.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's all made up. I mean, all of that is confected nonsense. That's the thing. There's no logical reason for E10 petrol whatsoever, and there
No.
was no reason not to have any petrol at all. And as we all know, a couple of weeks later there was petrol. So what was all that
Yeah.
about? So it's all
Yeah.
we're all being played for fools. Strangely enough, I usually write something for a major magazine where they sort of say, "Oh, can you give me your highlight of 2021?" And my highlight, and I was saving this up, but obviously I wasn't asked to write for it this year because I think they probably suspect I'm a troublemaker now. Um, is that
Why ever would they? Why ever would they?
yeah, I went to the biggest charging station for a car launch thing in, I think it was March, in my 42-year-old BMW, and took a picture of it there. So my point was, yeah, I drove there and drove home, and if I'd have been using the EV that I was driving that day, I would not have been able to achieve that journey in one go. I would have had to stop at least once. But my 42-year-old car, no problem at all. And if it needed to charge, it would have taken 5 minutes, and that was it. So that was my super clever point that I was going to make, and I had a picture as well of my car parked next to the charging point. But it's all been wasted, David. And it's something that I can share with you, and I can share with the podcast listeners. But that's
Hmm.
that's the clever point that I would have made, but I didn't get the opportunity to do so. And plus, I would have
Yeah.
got 30 quid for it as well. But there you go.
Well, I bought an EV this year, and I've not
I
been able to
know.
use it so far.
Mm. I'm looking
And
forward
yeah,
to having a go in that.
oh yes, absolutely.
Mm. Mm.
It's had some work done to it. It'll be out and about next year, and there will be some photo evidence of it, and
Mm.
possibly some video evidence as well from it.
Yeah, fantastic.
Um, so that for me was a highlight. The low point, I suppose, was not actually being able to use it at all. But there we go.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It
No.
was still lifted my spirits to have it, and depleted my wallet as well. But we're not going to go there. Moving on from that,
Mm.
and possibly in a linked point here, talking about the past and the future.
Mm.
Obviously, we've run this podcast for, oh God, we've done 44 of them now, I think. It's
Have
the
we?
44th, yeah.
Goodness
Plus
me.
a couple of little extra ones here and there just for results, etc., that kind of thing. I think what we'd both like to know is
Mm.
what do listeners want from us? What would you like us to do? If you've got a good idea for a banger and classic feature or something you'd like us to do, then tell us. We'll have a crack at it. We'll probably do it very badly, but we'll have a crack at it. And that's it. So get in touch. Tell us what you want us to do.
Mm.
Within reason, of course, obviously. This is a family podcast. We would love to hear from you. We'll take a break there and we'll be back in a jiffy. This is the final Bangers and Classics podcast of 2021. in which James Ruppert and David Malloy talk bells, just for a change. And we are back after the break. Last week we bought each other a car for Christmas, but now that the Christmas spirit is dissipated and festive cheers all gone, it's time to buy a car for somebody we don't like. It could be a mythical person, could be a real person, it doesn't matter. We're going to suggest to you the kind of car you should buy for someone you don't like. Now, why you buy a car for somebody you don't like, I don't know, and not really my business. But here we go. Maybe we should start with James.
Well, yeah. Well, there isn't anybody I don't like, David. Really, I mean, I'm a very, I'm very easygoing. Live and let live. I don't, particularly hate anybody in particular. Maybe people who run organisations like Insulate Kittens, maybe. I could, but I still don't hate them. I suppose I pity them. But yeah, I mean, if I did not like somebody, I mean, are the rules, David, that we buy them a car and then they have to use that car forever in perpetuity?
Unfortunately, not.
Oh no, because it's the
No,
way I want it to work like this, David.
well, you can do.
Can I?
You can
Yeah,
do. Well, you can make the rules as you go along.
yeah. Can I?
That's the whole. This is what's great about a podcast. We
Mm.
can make the rules up as we go along. If we don't like the
Oh,
rules, we can change them. Okay, so you want to buy a car for someone who's then got to use it in
right.
perpetuity.
Yeah. I mean, basically, we're buying them a car, and this is their only car, and they have to run it and look after it and do whatever. But that's the deal. So obviously, I could buy a fairly crappy car and give them the pain of that. But I'd buy them a Ferrari, David, and also I'd buy them a Ferrari Monza. And if you're unfamiliar or familiar with it, it's a preposterous thing where you have no windscreen. It's one of those daft ones where you're exposed to the elements. There's no windscreen. It looks ridiculous, and that's the only car that you can use. You unfortunately will have the running expensive of it as well. The carbon brakes, I think, will cost you, £10,000 a corner to sort out some way, shape, or form. You'll be abused in the street because it's got numbers written on it and a terrible. It's worth googling because it really is fairly awful. It looks like something I drew when I was about 6, and maybe that's a good thing. I don't know, but I think if someone was saddled with a supercar, the impracticalness and stupidness of it, where you can't enjoy it. There's nothing that you can do, and you have to go shopping in it and do the school run in it, and it's just ridiculous. And I think you'd be abused most of the time. It would do all your work for you. You wouldn't have to come to some elaborate, revenge is best a dish best served cold. You would know that every single day they'd be reduced to going out in a Ferrari Monza, which I think first of all might sound great, but I think by the end of it it'll be hell on wheels. I think you'll be very upset that you have to buy, run, own, and live with a ridiculous car. So that's my one. I don't know. Am I being clever? Am I being stupid?
No, I think that's very clever, but
Yeah.
I think it's far cooler than what I've got in mind.
Is it? Oh, okay.
Oh, I think so. See, the purpose of mine is to try to bring a particular person back to the light
Hmm.
because they've become a bit of a twit in, well, not even recent years, probably, but the last 20 years, to be honest, but become a bit of an idiot. And the person I'm talking about is the sort of person who's not satisfied with merely keeping up with the Joneses. That would just never do. The sort of person who, to quote Lord Denning, is veneer all the way through. Views of his neighbours are very important to this person,
Yeah.
exceedingly important. So my mission, as I see it, is to puncture that person's overinflated self-esteem, bring them back down to earth, and perhaps they will take a better path in life and be a better person. So I had to think about this. What sort of car would I plump for? Well, this is the sort of person who lives in a sort of neighbourhood where the concept of enjoying things ironically exists. Now, I don't understand that concept. Someone tried to explain it to me once, and I just laughed it out of court, so to speak. So I can't buy him a car like a Princess or an Ital. He can't have a car that has got any potential of being enjoyed ironically. So then I thought, okay, well, I could buy him a classic car, a rubbish classic car. But it's also plain, and it'd be plain to his neighbours, that he's not an enthusiast.
Yeah.
He lives his life within very narrowly defined boundaries. And there's no place in it for anything that doesn't advance his self-perceived status. And his neighbours would probably think, oh, he's bought a classic car. It's part of a networking ploy. And would think, oh, well, that's jolly clever of him. And I'm quite sure he'd get the flat cap, string back gloves, and he would hang around and go and meet up with similarly terminally dull people at meetings with no interest in the cars whatsoever, just to try and push himself a bit up whatever ladder it is he thinks is important. So that's not going to work either. So this leaves me with the bona fide banger. Now, what would I do with it? Well, it would have to appear suddenly within the curtilage of his property, and to wit, it would have to appear in his front garden. But which banger, James, do you think?
I don't know.
Well, you see, I came up with three. A Ford Orion or a Vauxhall Belmont has to be a base model or an L, but then it's plumped for a Volvo 343. And this 343 will be a tragic sight. It will, crucially, it has to have an MOT, but its paintwork will have rust blisters all over it. It'll be faded and it'll be peeling. There can be wheel trims and a maximum of 2 wheels. The engine will smoke and the interior will smell like a hippie on the third day of a wet open-air festival. But you might think that's not going to work because neighbours are going to say he'd never buy a car like that. But they might, because it'll also have a personalised registration mark with his initials on it. So it's going to be deposited on his lawn during or immediately after a period of heavy rainfall. So it'll sink a bit into the lawn, and it'll be impossible to move it without churning up his carefully manicured garden. And if we do it over the festive season, he's going to have trouble getting a crane. So the curtain twitchers in the neighbourhood are going to have a field day, and he is going to hate this so much. And in fact, if that doesn't get the point across to him that he's been an absolute twerp, it'll be joined by a base model Orion in a similar condition one dark night. I'm hoping not to ruin this chap. I want to just bring him back to what he should be, rather than what he is, because there's a vast gulf. Being of a kindly disposition, I'm trying to save him. The effect could be ruinous, of course. I mean, at least in his own mind it could be, and he might even feel compelled to move house and possibly even to another town.
Yeah.
But perhaps there's enough of the old person left in there to save, and that's what I'm trying to do. So there you go. You can all thank me later for that.
That's very noble of you, David.
I thought so. Besides, it'll be a good laugh anyway.
Yeah.
Talking of people I sort of know, as a chap, I was telling you about it, James, and this is perhaps a little admonition to listeners. I was found some CDs he recorded a while back. I was playing them in the car the last couple of nights, and this guy is extremely talented. He is a very good songwriter. He always said he was a so-so musician. I don't really agree with that. I think he had musical talent, but as a songwriter, a really, really good songwriter. Also a very good writer, but he's done nothing with it. And that frustrates the heck out of me, because somebody like him with his talent, he's got something to say, is doing nothing with it. So guys and gals out there, if you take one thing away from this podcast, apart from the goodie bag we're going to give you at the end of it, that is, if you've got a talent, use it. But don't be like the chap who's going to get the Volvo 343 in the garden. Don't go down that path.
No.
Be humble, but use your talent. It's given to you for a reason. Use it, and spread a little light in the world. That's a wonderful thing to do. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for listening to us this year. Obviously, because we started in 2021, and it may be 2021 when you hear this. It may be 2022, but either way, thank you very much for listening, and we hope that you have a very good new year, and indeed that it's a better place for all of us next year.
Yeah, Happy New Year, everybody, from my 2022 viewpoint, which isn't.
You see, I have to explain just before we go.
Yeah.
James is confused a little bit. He's been spending far too much time at the retirement home for Hammer horror actresses. In fact, he's got a season ticket there now, I reckon.
Well, there you go.
And it's going for him.
It's very dangerous work, David. You've got to be very careful.
Oh, it's a risk you willingly accept, isn't it, old boy?
Well, someone's got to do
it. We've heard that before. Anyway, take care. Cheerio.
Yeah, bye-bye, everybody.
The makers of this podcast would like to extend their thanks to the Governor and staff of HM Secure Institution Rockhall for releasing Messrs. Rupert and Malloy to appear in this week's podcast.